So I'm going to show you how to make my fingerboards. These two are done, and there's quite a bit to it. I make them a little differently than most folks, and well, I hope you enjoy it. I make my fingerboards out of 3 pieces of veneer. This is not just your regular veneer, of course. This is my hands-on 3 32/2 of an inch thick veneer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these at the 10th fret, and this is going to give me 2 small sections of veneer that I'll be able to do my marquetry in, and well, you'll see how this goes. The first thing we do is square the ends up on the sander. From this point forward, nothing can happen to this edge here, because this is the surface that's going to bear on the nut. In order to mark off the 10th fret, I butt this square up against a block on this, and we clamp it in place. My fret scale butts in there, fits in underneath the clamp nicely, and we're ready to mark off the 10th fret. Now we're going to cut this fingerboard just to the waist side as far as the 10th fret is concerned, and then we're going to use the sander to bring that edge just up. I use the Dozuki saw because it's the thinnest blade I've got in the shop. You have to go very slowly, but the saw itself does most of the work for you. So I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I've got just the tiniest little bit of extra wood past my score line with the razor, and that's going to allow me to clean that up right up to where the 10th fret slot will be. So I don't risk losing it. I just turn the belt by hand, watching for my scored line to just disappear. Now the piece we sawed off the bottom, we also want to clean that up. So now what we'll do is put everything back together. You can see that that gap is exactly where the 10th fret slot is going to be sawn. In fact, when the fingerboard is complete and we've sawn the fret slots, the fact that these 2 pieces were at one time separated is no longer going to be an issue. But it allows us to work with this fingerboard in 2 separate sections. It just requires a great deal of precision. So with everything in place, this setup allows you hands-free marking of the frets. Okay, I've got mise en place here for gluing up my fingerboards. As you can see, I've got my top layer, which is perfectly smooth on the back. It's been super glued together at the joint, and I'm going to produce a fingerboard that consists of 3 layers of veneer. Now you want the very top piece to set back just a little bit, because after it's finished gluing up, we'll use a chisel to just take off the bottom 2 layers and bring them flush to the top layer. Alright, so the fingerboards have been in the cauls here for quite some time now. And when they first come out of these cauls, they're fresh and the glue has to cure. So even though they're nice and flat, you've got to keep them clamped to something like the bench whenever you're not working on them so that they don't warp. Alright, so I'm right back where I started. I got the same setup with my fret scale, and only this time it's for keeps. So I'll do it with a razor. So I'm slotting the fingerboards for the frets, and I've done this one, and this is where the 3-ply laminate construction of the fingerboard really shows its character. The fret slots are cut to the middle of the middle layer of veneer, and so underneath the bottom of each fret slot, running the length of the fingerboard, is a full lamination, the bottom layer and the middle layer. And that laminate that's formed is not penetrated by the fret slot. And so even after the fret slots are cut, you have an incredibly stiff board. It doesn't bend very much at all. And this is going to go a long way towards making a really fine neck. I made this fret saw from an old back saw that I had lying around, and working with a piece of the frets that I've chosen, I've filed and sanded down just the bottom 1/4 inch of the blade, cut teeth on it that cut on a pull stroke, and I made a saw that produces a fret slot that's very, very accurate. It is a bit difficult to use because, like I said, it cuts only on the pull stroke, and there's no set on the teeth, so you've got to do most of the work forcing it through the wood. I've deepened the slots by running the razor over them until I've got a really nice groove in which to start the cut. To keep from penetrating too far into the fretboard, I put these thin strips of pine. And I make myself quite a bit of this stuff. I make up a batch of it, run it through the thickness sander, and then I cut strips of it and make them sticky on the back with some spray adhesive. And then this gives me a gauge so that when the saw just barely scratches this pine, it tells me that my slot is at the right thickness. And there we have just a little scratch on the pine on both sides, telling us that the slot is the right depth. And it's on to the next one.